7th grade art. So as I was talking about yesterday, I am going to try to get a couple of other demonstrations going for you so that you can just see some of the ways that some of the other artists could be used in your sketch pages. So right now I'm going to work on an example of Georgia O'Keeffe's work. And as you can see here, I've got my screen up and ready so that you can see exactly which images I'm looking at. So remember, you guys have access to these images on your Google Slides that I have on Google Classrooms. You can also use Google and find other images, but basically you want to be looking at some of the work that your artist has created so that you can create something within your circles that look like it could be created by that artist or is an actual part of one of your artist's paintings. So I'm just going to start with one of these circles, and I'm just going to sort of draw the lines that I see in one of the paintings that I have here. Remember, it's okay if it's not 100% exact. You just really want to make sure that it looks like your artist would have done the work that you do, or that it's obvious that your work is inspired by that artist. So I'll zoom in a little bit so you guys can see better because my pencil is a little bit light. And then I'm just going to start adding in some of the lines for where those petals go. Because Georgia O'Keeffe is really known for her flower paintings, as well as other landscapes and skulls and different things like that. So right now I'm just working on the flowery one that was on the left side of the Google Slides. And I'm just focusing mostly on the shapes that I see within that flower. Not too worried about all the tiny details, but more concerned about getting the overall shape of what everything is in there. And again, you get to kind of pick exactly what parts and pieces you use of your artist's work and how much of each painting that you use is actually within that piece. So that might be one sketch of an O'Keeffe-inspired circle. Darken some of these lines so you can see them more. And then to do the coloring step on hers, if that's the flower I choose to include, I would use colored pencil so that I could get some of the shading that is in there. Because she had lots of different values of pinks and greens and yellows and blues in that particular piece. So then I could also, on one of the other circles, use the image that is on the right-hand side of that Google slide. So still looking at the same Google slide here. And I'm just going to, again, focus on the lines that I'm seeing there. And the colors that they are will eventually become the focus once I get to that point. But the first thing to do is to get all those lines in there. So then that might be the only lines that I would need for that example. So here we've got the image on the left of the Google slide, and then the image that is on the right of the Google slide. And then I would use colored pencil, probably even on my sketch a little bit, to start to see exactly how I would want those to look on the final version. And then for her other circle here, the one at the bottom, I'm just going to actually look up some of her paintings and just find one that I want to use. So you can use the one that had the skulls on it. You can use another landscape. You can use one of her more abstracted pieces. You can use a combination. So for instance, if you wanted to divide this circle into multiple sections, like say I want to divide it in half, and then do one thing on one side and something else on the other side, I could easily do that. Just use a straight edge, approximate where the halfway line would be, draw that line in, and then this half could become one painting and this half could become another. So for instance, on hers, she has a lot of skull paintings. She also has some nice landscapes. So perhaps I put a landscape on one side, or part of a landscape, I should say, on one side. So right now I've just pulled up one of her landscapes that I happen to like, and I'm just doing a shortened version of it on this side here. And I'll show you in just a second which landscape it is. If you've looked at her work, you might already know which one it is. So the landscape in this side, I'll get a little closer so you can see better, is simply a version of this particular painting, which is one of Georgia O'Keeffe's very famous landscape paintings. And then on the other side, I could do half of one of her skulls, or I could do half of one of her flowers. I think what I'm going to do is find one of her skulls and do half of that, knowing that I'm going to start with a simple version of it, and then I'm going to add more of that detail as I go along. And then this particular skull also has a flower off to the side. So I'm just going to kind of draw in where that will eventually be. Then I'm going to go back into that skull and I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit more of the details that are there. Like the eye socket, some of the bone structure, that kind of stuff. Because remember, your goal is to make it obvious which artist your work is inspired by. It's okay if it's not an exact replica. So I'm not necessarily using every single tiny detail that she has in all of her paintings. What I'm doing is focusing primarily on making sure that it's recognizable as an O'Keeffe and that somebody looking at the painting would be able to tell which painting it is. And remember, these are sketches, so it's definitely okay if not every single detail is in your sketch. You want your final piece to be where you spend most of your time and where most of the detail comes in. And remember, with Georgia O'Keeffe, same as with Salvador Dali and a couple of the other artists, you're really going to be able to tell more once you add the color. So that might be a combination of the skull on the left side and the landscape on the right side. And the skull that is used is that one there that had the flower next to it. So again, that would just be a quick example of how you could do a Georgia O'Keeffe inspired set of sketches. And then you could use colored pencil to test out the color combinations and see which one you enjoy working with the most so that you know which one you're going to feel most confident and successful working on for your final larger circle.